The knocking shattered my sleep at exactly 5 a.m. Sharp, deliberate, the kind that says someone has been waiting for this moment. I pulled on my robe and shuffled to the front door, my heart already racing. Through the peephole, I saw my sister Deborah standing on the porch in a crisp business suit, holding a manila folder. It was barely dawn. She was smiling. I opened the door. "Deborah, what's wrong? Is someone hurt?" She stepped forward without being invited. "Nothing's wrong, Marianne. Actually, everything's finally right." She opened the folder and pulled out official-looking papers. "You need to start packing. I own this house now, legally." The cold morning air rushed past her into the hallway. Behind her, the street was still dark. My hands started shaking. This wasn't a crisis call. This wasn't an emergency. This was planned. Carefully, coldly planned. Deborah walked past me into the house like she owned it. Because apparently, she did. She pulled tape from her purse and stuck a formal eviction notice to the inside of my front door. 30 days, signed by an attorney I'd never heard of. "What is this?" My voice came out smaller than I wanted. She turned, still smiling that strange, satisfied smile. "This is overdue, Marianne. You've been living here rent-free for over a year. That ends now." I stared at the paper. Official county seal, legal language, my sister's name listed as property owner. "Dad left this house to both of us," I managed. Deborah shook her head slowly. "No, he left it to me. The probate finally closed. Check the county records if you don't believe me." She headed toward the door, then paused. 30 days. Not 31. I'm being generous. The door clicked shut behind her. I stood frozen in my childhood home, reading the eviction notice again and again. Overdue. But overdue for who? I walked through the quiet house as morning light crept through the windows. Every room held memories that Deborah had abandoned years ago. The kitchen where Mom taught me to bake. The living room where Dad's old chair still sat in the corner, worn leather holding the shape of him. The hallway lined with family photos, showing 2 daughters who used to be close. This wasn't just property. This wasn't just 4 walls and a roof. This was the place I stayed when everyone else scattered. When Deborah moved to Seattle for her career. When my marriage fell apart and I had nowhere else to go. When Dad got sick and needed someone. I had been that someone. I touched the doorframe to Dad's old bedroom, now my sewing room. Deborah hadn't set foot in this house in 3 years except for the funeral. And now she wanted me gone in 30 days. I remembered the promise I made to Dad during his final weeks. "You'll always have a home here, Marianne. Always." 15 months ago, Dad died slowly and painfully. Pancreatic cancer that stole him piece by piece over 8 months. I was the one who handled everything. The hospice nurses, the medication schedules, the 3 a.m. calls when he couldn't breathe, the quiet terror in his eyes when the pain broke through. I took family leave from my job at the library, spent my savings on supplements insurance wouldn't cover, held his hand through the worst of it. Deborah flew in for the funeral. She wore expensive black and cried beautifully. She stayed 3 days, then returned to her life in Seattle. Her husband, her career, her clean, ordered world untouched by bedpans and morphine drips. Before she left, she asked about paperwork. "Has the lawyer contacted you about the will?" I told her no. She said, "They will. Just let them handle everything." I believed family still meant something. That we'd figure it out together. I was wrong. Deborah was already asking questions because she already knew the answers. For over a year after Dad's funeral, nothing happened. No lawyer called. No documents arrived. I asked Deborah once, maybe twice, about probate. She always said the same thing. "The lawyers are handling it. These things take time." So I waited. I paid the property taxes from Dad's small savings account, kept the house maintained, fixed the leaky faucet in the bathroom, replaced the furnace filter, living carefully, quietly, believing that eventually Deborah and I would talk like adults and work something out. I went back to work at the library part-time. Started rebuilding my life in the only place that felt like home. The silence from Deborah felt like peace, like maybe she understood I needed this place. That I had earned the right to stay through all those nights caring for Dad. But silence wasn't peace. Silence was strategy. Deborah wasn't being kind. She was being patient, waiting for the exact legal moment when she could strike without warning. And that moment came at 5 a.m. on a Tuesday. Back in the present, standing in my kitchen with terrible coffee, I finally understood that smile. Deborah wasn't acting impulsively. She wasn't angry or hurt. She was executing a plan. A plan that required timing, legal precision, and complete surprise. She wanted me panicked, wanted me scrambling, wanted me to pack up and disappear like the eviction notice commanded. My hands steadied as something cold settled in my chest. Not anger exactly, something clearer. I opened my laptop and navigated to the county assessor's website. Public records. I typed in the address. The property record loaded slowly. Current owner Deborah Lynn Harrington. Transfer date 6 weeks ago. My stomach dropped. It was real. No forgery, no mistake. Deborah legally owned the house where I'd lived for 40 years. But I kept reading. There was another document attached to the property record, filed 15 years earlier. The document number meant nothing to me, but something about the date felt important. I clicked it open. My name appeared. Not as owner, as something else, something I didn't understand yet. I printed the document and read it 3 times. Legal language I couldn't quite parse. References to life estate and right of occupancy, an irrevocable agreement. I needed help. By 9 a.m. I was sitting in the cramped office of Legal Aid Services downtown. The attorney was younger than me, tired-looking, with kind eyes. Her name was Claire Foster. I handed her the eviction notice and the document I'd printed. She read silently, her expression shifting. "Miss Caldwell, does your sister know about this?" She tapped the older document. "Know about what?" I asked. "I don't even know what it is." Claire leaned forward. "This is a life estate agreement. Your father filed it 15 years ago. It gives you the legal right to occupy this property for your entire lifetime, regardless of who owns it." The office suddenly felt too small. "What does that mean?" Claire spoke carefully. "It means your sister owns the house, but she cannot remove you. Ever. You have a permanent right to live there until you die." My hands started shaking again, but this time different. "So the eviction notice is worthless," Claire finished. "She can't evict someone with a life estate. Any judge would dismiss it immediately." I sat back in the plastic chair, my mind racing. Why would my father do this? Claire pulled up more records on her computer. Life estates are often used to protect vulnerable family members. Your father probably wanted to ensure you always had a home, regardless of what happened to the property ownership. Vulnerable. The word stung, but it was accurate. Divorced. No children. Modest income. Dad had seen what I couldn't admit to myself. That I needed protection. That family doesn't always mean safety. Claire printed copies of everything. "Here's what happens next. Your sister will try to proceed with the eviction. When you show up to court with these documents, her case gets dismissed. Then she'll realize what she's actually dealing with." I took the papers with numb fingers. Should I tell her? Call her and explain? Claire met my eyes. "That's your choice. But legally, you don't have to tell her anything. You can simply wait and let her discover this herself." I thought about that smile at 5 a.m., the calculated cruelty of the timing, the assumption that I would panic and run. I made my decision. I wouldn't call Deborah. I wouldn't explain. I would let her believe the eviction would work. And I would wait. The next 2 weeks were strange and quiet. Deborah didn't call. Didn't text, probably assumed I was packing, crying, making desperate plans. I went to work at the library, came home, watered the garden Dad planted 30 years ago. At night, I reread the life estate documents until I understood every word. Dad had filed this when I was going through my divorce, when everything felt unstable and scary. He never mentioned it, just quietly protected me. I found his handwriting in the margins of his copy, stored in a box in the attic. "Marianne will always have a home. This is for her." My throat tightened reading those words. He knew. Even then, he knew Deborah would prioritize money over family. On day 16, Deborah showed up again, this time with a realtor. A cheerful woman in a red blazer holding a tablet. "Good morning. We're here to do a preliminary walkthrough for listing photos." I stood in the doorway. "I didn't give permission for that." The realtor's smile faltered. "Miss Harrington is the owner. She scheduled this appointment." I spoke calmly. "I have a life estate on this property. You can't enter without my consent." The realtor's smile vanished. She turned to Deborah. "You didn't mention a life estate." Deborah's face went pale. "What are you talking about?" I just smiled. "My turn now." I closed the door quietly and went back to my coffee. Through the window, I watched Deborah and the realtor arguing on the lawn. The realtor kept pointing at her tablet. Deborah kept shaking her head, gesturing angrily. Finally, the realtor got in her car and drove away. Deborah stood on the lawn for a long moment, staring at the house. Then she pulled out her phone. I knew exactly who she was calling. Her attorney. The one who filed the eviction notice without checking the full property records. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt tired. This wasn't victory. This was just the beginning of Deborah understanding what she'd actually tried to do. That night, I made dinner in the kitchen Dad renovated in 1998. Chicken and rice, his favorite. I ate alone at the table where we'd shared thousands of meals. The house settled around me, with familiar creaks and sighs. Deborah thought silence meant I was weak. That divorce had broken me, that I would fold under pressure and disappear quietly. She was about to learn what I'd learned through years of night shifts with a dying father. Silence doesn't mean surrender. Sometimes silence means you're thinking, planning, waiting for the right moment. I didn't have to do anything except stay right here. 4 days later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, it rang again. Same number. This time I answered. Marianne, it's Brett. Deborah's husband. His voice had an edge I'd never heard before. You need to stop this game you're playing. I set down my tea. I'm not playing any game, I'm just living in my home. He laughed, sharp and bitter. Your home? Deborah owns that house. You're squatting, being petty because your life didn't work out. The words should have hurt. A year ago they might have. Brett, I suggest you speak with your attorney about life estates and property rights. This isn't a game, it's the law. Silence on the line. Then, you can't do this. We need to sell that house. We have plans. Plans. Always someone else's plans for my life. I'm not stopping you from selling, I said calmly, but the buyer would have to accept that I live here. Permanently. More silence. Then he hung up. No goodbye, no response, just the click of disconnection. I saved the call in my records, started a notebook documenting everything. Dates, times, conversations. Dad taught me that. Write everything down, he'd say. Memory fades, but paper doesn't. A week later, a county inspector showed up. Deborah had requested a mandatory property inspection, perfectly legal with proper notice which she'd provided. I let him in, walked him through every room. He was professional, thorough, making notes on his tablet. The house was old. That wasn't a secret. The roof needed work within 3 years. The plumbing showed its age. Foundation was settling, common in houses from the 1970s. Nothing dangerous, nothing that required immediate repair. Just the natural aging of a home that had sheltered a family for decades. But nothing that would make this an easy, quick sale either. The inspector finished and thanked me politely. After he left, I understood Deborah's strategy. She wanted documentation that the house needed expensive repairs. Wanted to pressure me by making me responsible for maintenance I couldn't afford. But the life estate agreement was clear. The owner was responsible for major repairs, not the occupant. I called Claire Foster that afternoon. She confirmed it. Any structural repairs are Deborah's responsibility. You're only responsible for basic upkeep and utilities. Another crack in Deborah's plan. The house she wanted to flip quickly now came with expensive obligations and an occupant who couldn't be removed. 2 weeks later, I found out why Deborah was so desperate. I was researching property records, learning to navigate the county database, when I discovered something. Deborah had used the house as collateral for a substantial loan 6 months ago. Before the probate even closed. The loan document listed the property value at $340,000. She'd borrowed $200,000 against it. I printed everything and took it to Claire. She studied the documents with growing concern. This is problematic. She took a loan against property she didn't fully control. I felt cold understanding wash over me. She was planning to sell quickly, pay off the loan, and pocket the difference. Claire nodded. And now she can't. Because you're here, and buyers won't touch a property with a life estate attached. The resale value just dropped significantly. I thought about Brett's angry phone call, about Deborah's panic when the realtor mentioned the life estate. What happens now? Claire was quiet for a moment. The bank will want their money. When they realize the property can't be sold easily, they'll start asking questions. Your sister is in trouble. I should have felt satisfaction. Instead, I felt something heavier. This wasn't just about greed anymore. Deborah had made promises she couldn't keep. That night, Deborah finally called me directly. Her voice was different, strained. "Marianne, we need to talk. Can I come by?" "When?" I asked. "Tomorrow evening, please." Something in her tone made me agree. She arrived at 6 p.m. with Brett. No attorney this time, no realtor, just the two of them looking tired and angry. We sat in the living room where we used to open Christmas presents as children. The irony wasn't lost on me. Deborah started carefully. "I think there's been a misunderstanding about Dad's wishes." I waited. Brett jumped in. "The life estate is obviously a mistake, an oversight. Your father meant for Deborah to inherit the house cleanly." I kept my voice level. "There's nothing in the documents suggesting it was a mistake. He filed it deliberately 15 years ago." Deborah's composure cracked. "You've already taken enough, Marianne. I gave you a year to live here rent-free. I've been patient. This is ridiculous." Taken enough. As if caring for Dad was taking. As if staying meant stealing. I finally spoke. "What was I supposed to take, Deborah? What did I get from watching Dad die that you didn't?" The silence was thick and ugly. Brett looked away. Deborah's face flushed. "That's not fair." "No," I agreed. "It's not. None of this is fair." I stood up and got the folder Claire had prepared. Inside was Dad's handwritten note from the life estate filing. I'd found it in his papers. "People get strange when money shows up. This protects Marianne. She stays in the house, always. That's what I want." I handed it to Deborah. Watched her read Dad's words. Her hands started shaking. "He didn't trust you," I said quietly. "Even 15 years ago, he knew you'd choose money over family." Deborah looked up, eyes wet. "That's not true." But her voice carried no conviction. Brett took the paper, read it, then set it down carefully. His expression changed. Something bitter and resigned. "You knew the life estate existed," he said to Deborah. Not a question, a realization. Deborah's silence was answer enough. Brett stood up. "You told me the house was free and clear. That's why we took the loan. You said—" He stopped, looked at me. "She knew, didn't she? She knew you had the life estate and thought you wouldn't find out in time." The marriage was fracturing right in front of me. Deborah had lied to everyone, including her husband. Brett left first, walking out without another word to Deborah. She sat on my couch, deflated, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. "I didn't think you'd fight back," she said finally. "I thought you'd just leave." "Where would I go?" I asked. She had no answer. We sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Deborah spoke again. "The loan is due in 4 months. If we can't sell the house or refinance, we lose everything we put down. $60,000. I did the math. She'd borrowed $200,000, but the bank required a down payment. That money was now trapped in a property she couldn't sell. "I'm sorry about your situation," I said carefully, "but I'm not leaving my home." Deborah looked around the room, at the photos of us as children, at Dad's chair, at the life we'd both come from. "This was supposed to be simple," she whispered. "I inherit the house, sell it, split the money, clean and fair." "But Dad didn't want it clean and fair," I replied. "He wanted me protected. There's a difference." Deborah stood to leave. At the door she turned back. "What do you want, Marianne? There has to be something." I met her eyes. "I want what I already have, to stay here." Her face hardened. "We'll find another way." But her voice lacked conviction. For 3 weeks, nothing happened. Then Claire called. "The bank is demanding resolution. They've discovered the life estate and are threatening to accelerate the loan. Your sister has 30 days to refinance or pay in full." I asked what that meant for me. "Nothing," Claire said. "Your rights don't change, but Deborah is going to be under enormous pressure." That pressure arrived the next evening. Deborah came alone this time. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "I need you to sign a document agreeing to vacate within 6 months. Just something I can show the bank to prove the property will be saleable." I shook my head. "I can't do that." She slumped into a chair. "Brett left. He's staying with his brother. Says I destroyed our financial future." I felt a flicker of sympathy, just a flicker. "I'm sorry your marriage is struggling," she laughed bitterly. "Struggling? It's over, Marianne. He'll never forgive me for this." We sat in uncomfortable silence. Then Deborah asked quietly, Did you really not know about the life estate? I told her the truth. Not until you tried to evict me. She absorbed this. So you could have told me, could have warned me before I took the loan. Yes, I admitted, I could have. Why didn't you? I chose my words carefully. Because you came to my door at 5 a.m. with an eviction notice, no conversation, no negotiation, just orders to leave. Deborah had no response to that. Over the next week, Deborah called twice. Both times just to talk, not to argue. Strange, stilted conversations about nothing important. She was lonely, I realized. Her plan had collapsed, her marriage was ending, and she was finally understanding what I'd known for years. That family is complicated. That home isn't just ownership. That Dad's choices had been about love, not law. One evening she asked if she could visit, just to see the house. Not to argue, she promised, just to remember. I agreed. She walked through slowly, touching things. The kitchen counter where Mom used to roll out cookies. The mantel where our school photos still stood. Dad's chair, which she circled but didn't sit in. I forgot how much of them is still here, she said softly. We ended up in the kitchen with tea. Deborah cried quietly. I thought I was being smart, strategic, taking what was mine. The house was never yours, I said gently. It was Dad's. Then it became mine to live in and yours to own. That's complicated, but it's not unfair. She wiped her eyes. I can't keep it. Can't afford the insurance and taxes and repairs with the loan hanging over me. I'd been thinking about this for weeks. Then sell it. To me. Deborah looked up, confused. You don't have that kind of money. I'd done the math carefully. I have some savings. I can get a mortgage for the rest. I'll buy it at fair market value, minus the cost of repairs the inspector found. That's probably $280,000. Enough to pay off your loan and leave you with some equity. She was quiet for a long time. Why would you do that? Because I want this house to actually be mine, not just a life estate. Mine. It was the truth. Living here under Deborah's legal ownership felt incomplete. Buying it would mean full independence. And, I added, because you're still my sister. Even after everything, I don't want to see you lose everything. Deborah started crying again, not manipulative tears, real ones. I don't deserve that. No, I agreed. You probably don't, but Dad taught me that family helps each other, even when it's hard. She asked for time to think. I gave her 3 days. When she called back, she agreed. But fair market value, she insisted. I don't want charity. I respected that. We would do this legally, properly, with Claire overseeing everything. Clean transfer, no ambiguity. Deborah could pay her loan, salvage something from the disaster, and I would finally fully own my home. The process took 6 weeks. Bank appraisals, mortgage applications, title searches. Claire handled everything with careful precision. Deborah and I communicated through attorneys mostly, professional, distant, but not hostile anymore. Brett filed for divorce. Deborah moved into a small apartment in Seattle, started therapy, told me in a brief phone call that she was trying to understand who I became. I didn't offer comfort or criticism, just listened. The closing was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon. Deborah flew in for it. We met at the title company office, signed papers in silence. The notary, the attorneys, the loan officer all maintained professional pleasantness. When it was done, I owned the house, completely. Title in my name only. Deborah got a check for $84,000 after the loan was paid. Not the fortune she'd imagined, but enough to start over. Outside, we stood in the parking lot. Awkward. Deborah spoke first. Thank you for not destroying me. I shook my head. I didn't save you, Deborah. You destroyed yourself. I just refused to be collateral damage. She accepted that. Fair enough. We didn't hug, didn't make promises to stay in touch, just nodded and went to our separate cars. I drove home through the afternoon traffic, hands steady on the wheel. I owned my home, fully, legally, permanently. But Deborah wasn't quite done. She kept stalling on the final paperwork. Small things. A signature needed here, a form not returned there. The delays added up. Late fees from the title company, insurance complications. I realized she was still hoping for something, a miracle. A last-minute buyer who would pay more, a way to rewrite the ending. But time ran out. The bank set a final deadline, either complete the sale or face foreclosure proceedings. I called Deborah. This has to end. Sign the papers or lose everything. Her voice was hollow. I know, I thought I'd feel different, relieved, but I just feel empty. I understood that more than she knew. Endings rarely feel like we expect them to. Sign the papers, Deborah. Let this be over. She signed that afternoon. Sent everything by overnight courier. 2 days later, the title transfer was complete, recorded with the county, published in legal notices. The house was mine. Deborah sent a single text. It's done. I hope you're happy there. I didn't respond immediately. What was there to say? Hours later, I wrote back, I hope you find your way. She didn't reply. I didn't expect her to. Signing day was quiet. No celebration, no witnesses beyond the notary and attorneys, just signatures in blue ink and the soft sound of papers shuffling. When the notary stamped the final document, I felt something release in my chest. Not joy, not triumph, just completion. Deborah sat across from me but wouldn't meet my eyes. Her attorney packed up his briefcase quickly, ready to escape the awkwardness. Claire gave me a warm handshake. Congratulations, Miss Caldwell. You handled this with remarkable strength. After everyone left, I sat in the empty conference room for a few minutes. The house was mine. The battle was over. I'd protected what Dad wanted me to have. But I'd also lost something. Whatever fragile connection Deborah and I once had was severed now. Not by anger, but by choices. By priorities. By the kind of pain that leaves scars instead of wounds. I drove home slowly, parked in the driveway that was now mine alone. Walked up the steps I'd climbed 10,000 times. The door opened to the same room, same furniture, same memories. Nothing had changed, and everything had changed. The next morning I called a locksmith, changed all the locks. Not out of anger or fear, just finality. New keys for new ownership. The locksmith was efficient and professional. When he handed me the new keys, shiny and sharp, I felt something settle deep inside. This house was a fortress now, not keeping anyone out, just defining clearly what was mine. I walked through each room that afternoon, touching familiar surfaces. The kitchen table, Dad's chair, the door frame where Mom marked our heights each birthday. Deborah was in those memories. Happy versions of her from decades ago. That sister might as well have been a different person. I didn't miss the Deborah who tried to evict me, but I grieved the sister who used to braid my hair and share secrets after bedtime. The house seemed to exhale that evening, settling into its new reality. No more uncertainty, no more legal threats, just peace. I made dinner, pasta with vegetables from the garden, ate at the table alone but not lonely. The house and I had survived. Together. 3 months later, I got a letter from Deborah, handwritten. Where for her? Marianne, I've been in therapy trying to understand what happened. My therapist says I need to apologize, but not for closure, for accountability. So here it is. I'm sorry. I thought you were weak. Thought divorce had broken you. Thought I could push you out because you'd always been the soft one. I was wrong. You were never weak. You were enduring. There's a difference I'm only now understanding. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know I see it now. What I did, who I became. I'm working on being different. Better. Maybe someday we can talk again. Until then, take care of Dad's house. You earned it. I read the letter 3 times, felt tears building but not falling. It was a good apology, honest. But it didn't change what happened, didn't erase the 5 a.m. knock or the eviction notice or the months of legal warfare. I wrote back, brief. Thank you for the apology. I accept it. I hope you find peace, Deborah. Take care of yourself. I didn't say we'd talk again. Didn't promise reconciliation, just acknowledged her words and moved forward. Some relationships don't survive. That's not always tragedy. Sometimes it's just truth. Dawn comes at 5 a.m. in early autumn. I woke naturally at that hour now, no alarm needed. Body memory from all those mornings with Dad. I made coffee in the quiet kitchen. Watched light filter through the curtains Dad hung 20 years ago. The house was peaceful, completely, finally mine. The paperwork sat in a fireproof safe in my closet. Deed, title insurance, mortgage documents, all bearing my name only. Marianne Caldwell, owner, not occupant, not estate beneficiary, owner. I thought about Deborah sometimes, wondered if she was rebuilding her life in Seattle, if therapy was helping, if she'd found peace in the ruins of her plan. Mostly I thought about Dad, about the gift he'd given me 15 years ago without telling me, the safety net I didn't know I'd need. Thank you, I whispered to his empty chair. Outside, the neighborhood woke up slowly. Cars starting, dogs barking, the ordinary sounds of life continuing. I was part of that now. Stable. Rooted. Home. Deborah had thought silence meant surrender, that my quietness during Dad's illness meant weakness, that I would panic and scatter when threatened. They were wrong. All of them. Silence meant I was thinking, enduring, planning, waiting for the right moment. And when that moment came at 5 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, I was ready. Not because I'm strong, because I learned to survive. There's a difference. And that difference saved my home.